Hello, and welcome to our weekly LinkedIn Live leadership series, Voices of Leadership. And thank you for your patience. We had a few technical issues today, but we are here and we're ready to get started. So, I'm Kathy Eastwood, your host and founder of E equals Y. And each week, we love to explore the fascinating world of leadership, featuring voices from various generations, industries, and backgrounds. Because we know a team's job is to deliver results, and the role of the leader is to empower, inspire, and enable the people and the team to deliver those results. And there's a repeatable formula, the E3 leadership code: express plus engage plus execute, powered by emotional qualities. But how each leader applies that to their approach is individual because there's no mold. And that's why we love talking to different leaders to hear how they apply the E3 leadership code in their own unique way, whether they realize they're using those words or not. So today's guest is someone that I am very excited to have here because, as we kick off the new year, many leaders are reflecting not just on what they want to achieve, but also how do they want to lead, especially when they know conversations can be uncomfortable and the stakes are often high. So, my guest today is Ann Ranson, a heart centered strategist, coach, and speaker who helps leaders align purpose with performance. And she's also a dear friend who I got to meet in person this week. So, I'm so excited. Ann's focus is really on how leaders show up in the moments that matter most, when tension is present and clarity is really needed. So Ann and I connected through a shared belief that values and strong values alone aren't enough, right? That alignment has to lead, and it really led us to doing a joint E3 Leaders Lunch and Learn on civility, the missing baseline. And if you missed that lunch and learn, I'll ask Imelda to put it in the chat. Go back and listen because there's a lot of goodness that we shared during that session. So Ann is the creator of the Civility Pledge and the Civility Quotient assessment. It's a practical set of tools designed to move civility out of theory and into everyday leadership behavior. She's often describing civility as the lubricant to problem solving. I love that word. And it lowers friction, clears tension, and makes progress possible. So, Ann, thank you so much for joining me. Before we dive in, I didn't do justice on your introduction. Why don't you take a minute to share with the audience your leadership journey and what really drew you into heart-centered leadership, and how did you find that path led you so deeply to civility as a leadership capability?
Okay, well, thank you, Kathy. I'm excited to be here. Um, well, I didn't start out thinking I was going to find civility. I was in a position and I'd been in the radio industry. It was my first career for many, many years. I'd enjoyed great success. Everything was wonderful until it wasn't. And as I remember one day sitting and thinking, helping Chevrolet sell one more car does not feed my soul. No offense to Chevrolet. GM was a great client of mine. I loved working with them, but it was an inner calling that really started that journey. So I kind of had a year's transition. I tell people, don't do what I did, which was I just called my boss and said, I quit.
Mm.
No plan, no. And I'm a strategist. It's like, how does that even happen? But as I took that journey without this plan, I was noticing the shift that was going on. So let's go back. When I created the civility plan was in 2010. So thinking about what was going on in the country at that time, social media was coming on board, the Tea Party, extremism, all of these things were starting to happen. It was right after the financial crisis of 2008. And so tensions were really high. And I'll just quickly tell the story. I was watching CBS Sunday Morning. There was a woman who was an expert on afternoon tea. She started talking about what a civil activity it was. And it was like, those graphics where the pieces just fell into place. And I realized that this was a leadership gap, a leadership opportunity. There
Yeah.
is definitely a gap, but there's a leadership opportunity because when we bring civility forward, it positively impacts all sorts of things. So I could talk for a long time about that, but I'm sure you have a few questions.
Yeah. And so when you talk about civility, and for the audience, there's different definitions, right? We've talked about this before. What is it when you're talking about civility? What does it mean to you? And what are you looking to help people to understand?
Well, I would get my civility pledge out because the key words are in there. And it's about respect, curiosity, acceptance. It is about not demonizing people because they're different. There's a woman named Elizabeth Lesser that founded the Omega Institute in New York. And shortly after I saw the woman talking about tea, I saw Elizabeth doing a speech on take an other to lunch. She said, if you take somebody to lunch, maybe their views are 180 from yours. But over the course of that lunch, you find out, you know what? They're a very fine person. And that's that ingredient of just because, so we're in a meeting and we're having a disagreement on the strategy or on what needs to go next. I don't have to call you names. I don't have to make you out to be an idiot. It's just, I wonder, have you ever considered, because now I'm showing respect, because you clearly have good ideas. I just don't happen to agree with this one.
And it's okay to disagree, right?
Yes. In fact, we need more civil disagreement. Because I learned when you push back on my ideas, as long as you do it with civility, because here's what happens. If we don't, what happens? Our ears shut down and I don't hear a word you say. And so then you're not having any kind of a conversation. You're just spewing on somebody.
Yeah. So, I mean, you work with a lot of leaders that genuinely care, right? They have value. I mean, everyone has values, right? And everyone wants to do well, right? I always say, no one wants to wake up with bad intent.
Absolutely.
But what do you see in the organizations that really help, shine that light that civility is the missing baseline, especially in difficult conversations?
Honestly, they don't get there on their own most of the time to this idea of civility, at least in my experience. What they get is this feeling of a lot of insecurity.
Mm.
I have sympathy or empathy, I'm not sure which, for leaders who have so many pressures coming from so many different directions, and they conflict. They don't all align. Profits at all costs does not align with let's create a structure, a culture that's based on civility, at least on paper. And so I think I believe that leadership, before we can be a leader out there, we have to have self awareness. We have to be in alignment and with our own values. We all talk a good game about what I believe in honesty and integrity and respect, and yet let somebody cut me off on the freeway because in Dallas we have every city, and I'm not quite so civil. Now, I wouldn't say that to them in person because I'm a nice woman. But these are the things we don't, I think many times we don't have enough self awareness to see where that gap is.
And how do we help people see that there is that gap? Right? Because so often we're talking to leaders and they're like, oh, yeah, I have the integrity. I have my values. I'm ready to show up. So, how do we help people understand that our intention is not always how we show up and it's not the same as the impact we're actually having?
Yeah. Well, I think it starts simply with listening. I think my greatest skill as a coach is listening. And I'm listening for what people say But probably just as importantly, I'm listening to what they don't say. And it's those in between moments that gives me the opportunity to, in my training as a coach, we were taught that coaching is the art of inquiry. I don't have the answers. They have the answers. It's my job to figure out asking good questions, but that starts with listening. And so I think it's when we notice a gap or an inconsistency or a lack of congruence, we step in and say, oh, well, how do you think that lines up with the culture that you're trying to create? Because I give people the benefit of the doubt that they have the best intentions, and that just the state of being
Yeah.
is very distracting to that.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I love what you've done, and it's a practice that I've picked up as well, is actually having conversations about the intention of being civil. Right. And that's, I'd love for you to share with the audience a little bit more about your pledge. And I think you should say the pledge outright, because I think it's so powerful. Because we want other people to adopt it, right? If everyone adopts this, then it creates the conversations.
Absolutely. Well, it's that all, I don't remember what the shampoo was, but herbal essence or something. And you tell two friends and you tell two friends, etc. And when I created this in 2010, I sent a copy. In those days, everything was snail mail. I sent a copy to every congressman, every senator, inviting them to take the Civility Pledge. I'm waiting. I'm still waiting for anybody to give me a positive response. So here's the Civility Pledge. I pledge to behave with civility, treating myself and others with respect and consideration. I pledge to show grace, acceptance, and curiosity. I pledge to be honest, authentic, and wholly present right here, right now. I pledge to invite others to take the pledge and to engage in intentional and civil conversations.
I get goosebumps every time I hear that, Ann.
Oh, I love that. I do too. And I've had it for 15, 16 years now.
Because I don't want to say it's so simple, but it is the core of who we are as humans. And when we can be reminded that, yes, this is how I intend to show up, and this is what's important.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I just heard someone said, "Oh no, it froze up as you said that pledge." I'm going to ask you to say it again, because it is
Okay.
that important.
Okay. Here we go. Hope everybody's unstuck. I pledge to behave with civility, treating myself and others with respect and consideration. I pledge to show grace, acceptance, and curiosity. I pledge to be honest, authentic, and wholly present right here, right now. I pledge to invite others to take the pledge and to engage in intentional and civil conversations.
Again, still goosebumps, right?
Yeah.
Because when that conversation happens and you set the intention and you make that an agreement among your team members, suddenly when someone isn't acting with one of those behaviors, you're giving people permission to call you on it.
Yeah.
Right? You said you wanted to be curious. You said you wanted to be authentic. When you shared with me, I don't know, that, I don't care, or, whatever, like dismiss me, you're not living that pledge.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel that and tell me, in your experience too, do you find that people then have the words to then have that civil debate?
It takes practice because we're out of practice.
Mm,
We sit in a meeting and we may agree on the general strategy, but the tension in the room is so thick that nobody opens their mouth. And so I think that's why we have to practice. We have to practice. Marcus Buckingham, whom I'm a big fan of, wrote a book, I think 2 or 3 years ago, called Love and Work. And he talks about sharing a reaction instead of feedback. Because feedback is my opinion. And it's usually saying, well, Kathy, that was a pretty good speech. If only you had done X, Y, and Z. And so we give with one hand and take it away with the other. And so I think with civility and with practicing, we can give honest reaction. My reaction to your speech was I was a little confused. It doesn't make you bad. It doesn't say you did it wrong. It's just saying I was a little confused. I didn't quite understand the point that you were trying to make. Can I make one point? And this hasn't stood out as much to me as I reread this today. And I think I'm going to get emotional, which is my nature. Treating myself and others with respect and consideration.
Yeah.
And I don't know about y'all, but I have a little self-judge operating. I've given her a name. Her name is CJ for critical judge. And so sometimes I send her to the library. That's kind of the metaphor. It's like, okay, now you go in the library now because I need peace. And your judgment is not helping me. So I don't know why, it just jumped out at me, particularly today. And leaders are under the microscope. And yet, is it my stockholders that I'm beholden to? Is it my team that I'm beholden to? What about myself? What about my own values?
Absolutely. And, I'm often working with a lot of leaders, and as the pressure is rising, I'm hearing more and more of people feeling pressure to show up a certain way and to show up with, you got to be more urgent. You got to, dig in further. You got to make decisions quicker. And people are thinking, oh my God, that's not my natural tendency. That goes against who I am. And I think it is really important that we have to know ourselves. We don't have to fit this mold. We can be as, if not more effective when we are in our own space, right? And that we're leading from our values and our core strengths of who we are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a lot of my work, and I have a workbook about what matters most. Because if I don't know what's most important to me, how can I show up authentically? Or how can I respect myself? Because I don't even know what I want.
Yeah.
And we're not taught that. Society doesn't say, oh, well, let's stop and see what Kathy thinks about this. What are your true feelings about this? We just want to hit the number.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with hitting the number. The great thing is when we have cultures that embrace civility and some of the other things that I espouse, like my whole thing is about aligning purpose and performance. It's not purpose over performance. It's not civility without performance. It's civility in service to performance.
And then this is why you and I get us along so well, Anne, right? Because we absolutely believe in that same thing, right? We have to drive performance, but in a human first, in a personal way. You can't separate these two things. I want to go back to a second as you were talking about, that feedback and talking about how I interpreted it and how I felt it. I've found that changes conversations with people so much because you want to talk about like you didn't do this or you didn't do that. But when you actually turn it around and say, this is how I felt, right? This is how you made me feel. You can't argue people's feelings.
Yeah.
And it is so powerful in that feedback because that's how you start to build trust. And I think about, that introspection. One of the exercises we look to do is that same exercise you're talking about that you have your clients do, right? Know yourself and then share it with your team members.
Yeah.
right? And that power, because suddenly it's trusting. Like, oh, I didn't know you were that. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, you went through the same thing I went through.
Yeah. See, that's so important. Is, what's that old saying? We all put on our pants one leg at a time. I mean, the statistics are we're 99% all the same. And so we let what I've become to characterize as silly, stupid shit, pardon me, to divide us. I have a friend who is a musician and he went to Russia like, I don't know, 30 or 40 years ago and wrote a lot of music there. I'm going to cry almost. And he said, those Russian mothers, they want the exact same thing we do. They want peace for their children.
Yep.
And I understand world politics and all that kind of stuff. But in truth, I think we all want the same thing.
Yeah. And when we can understand our why, our values, share them with others, that's when you build that foundation of trust and you do truly, you assume the best from someone.
Yes.
And I think it's so powerful. Deborah was mentioning that, our school should have to do the pledge every morning, right? Imagine that's the pledge. I think corporate should be doing the same thing,
Yeah.
right? Because it resets how we show up and what we do.
Yeah.
So, and you and I could talk all day, and I want to be very conscious of your time because we started a little late. So, not only do you have the pledge, you also have an assessment.
Mm-hmm.
And with the assessment, what do you help teams and organizations and groups think about in that with the assessment?
Well, we take off our rose colored glasses and we look in the mirror. And it's a self assessment. You say, how do I react in this situation? How would I grade myself on respect? How would I grade myself on authenticity? And then you add all the scores up and you see, hey, am I in the bottom quadrant? Am I in the top? And so that, because as you and I've discussed, self awareness, I believe, is at the core of everything. And so, most all of the tools that I work with, I use strengths. That's another great tool. There's a lot of them, but that's the one that I use for self awareness. I know it changed my whole life perception of myself. I was called a crybaby when I was a little girl. Well, not just when I was a little girl, but until I got my strengths and I learned that my number one strength is empathy.
Mm.
Well, it makes sense why I cry, but I like the sound of empathy a whole lot better because when people were calling me a crybaby, they were not giving me a compliment.
Yeah.
And so that self awareness that you're talking about, um, and I think people want it, but they feel the pressure to perform. The performance so outweighs the purpose that the purpose gets lost, even though every company, every organization has a purpose for existing. They're
Yes.
trying to serve a need in the marketplace.
Yep. But it's what we have to help people understand is actually the more you understand and focus on your purpose and the individuals and build the trust, that actually drives greater performance.
Absolutely.
I was talking to a CEO the other day. He's just taken over a multi-billion-dollar business. I said, how do you feel? What's going on? And he's like, Kath, it all comes down to trust. I've got to build trust with my people quickly because I can't hire trust. I've got to build it.
Yeah. Great insight. Now, that's a person who has some self awareness.
Absolutely. But it's been a journey.
Yeah,
but
of course.
but it is that is what success is. And the more we learn that performance will happen from that purpose, we'll all be better off.
Yeah. I
So,
wanted to mention just briefly also that SHRM, the HR organization, has, I think it was in 23 or 20, maybe it was 24, they've come out with a series of studies on civility. So this isn't something that Ann just made up because it feels good and I'm an empathy person. And there are real facts and real statistics. I'm not as statistically oriented, so I can't quote those off the top of my head. But for people who want more data and more deep dive into it, SHRM has some fabulous resources.
So what we'll do is we'll put them in the chat after this call because I've got them from our lunch and learn that we
Okay.
did. So I'll add those in. And, for those that are listening, this is something that is very tangible, something you can do. And, there's lots of tools. Ann mentioned strength finders, there's Clarity 4D, there's different tools. There's the assessment that we put in the chat. So reach out to either one of us or both of us, and we're here to support you because we are on a mission to really get everyone to understand what civility looks like and that it is the baseline for driving performance in organizations. So, Ann, as we finish up here, any last thoughts you have for the audience?
Take the pledge, give it to your kids, your school, your teachers, your colleagues. I don't know, how 10, 20, maybe 30 words on this card. It's on my website. I have a Facebook page on the Civility Pledge. It's simple, but not necessarily easy.
Yeah, I agree. And again, click on the link in the assessment. It has the pledge in there as well. And we'll put in the links to Ann's website as well. So Ann, thank you.
Oh, this was great. Thank you.
And I'm going to have you back again so we can talk more about this. But I really appreciate it. And I hope for the audience, this gives you some inspiration, motivation, and hope. Because it is a crazy world out there right now. And, just starting with the basics, focusing on yourself, knowing your values, and putting that out, taking the pledge, and committing to show up with civility will change your day and your game and your performance.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks all. Appreciate it. Have a great one.
Thank you.